Alright, so we got a new Tulsa King episode. It is episode 4, and the episode is called Visitation Place. And the episode actually starts off where we left off from last week, where Joe White, shows up to the guy who tried to shoot him during his driving test, and he finds him. And I actually thought that Joe White was going to kill this character, but he ends up not killing him, and then he ends up getting him to work for him, and then the guy has to end up paying $300 a week. Another thing that I like about this show is the fact that even though, Joe White is this badass mobster boss guy, there's also this, other side to him where he's really just this old, out-of-touch man who has a lot of feelings that he hasn't really dealt with. And I really like that part of the show. And obviously in the next episode, it appears that Joe White's brother didn't really make it. So if you saw the, promo for next episode, by the way, if you do not want to know, what happens in the next episode, I suggest that you do not watch the promos for the end of each episode, because last week's episode pretty much gave away one of the key points of this episode. But back to my main point, like I said, I like that they're not trying to glorify his actions. And even though, like I said, he is this badass guy, he also has to deal with a lot of stuff, which I think makes his character a lot more interesting and compelling. Another interesting thing about this episode is Armand. You can see, the effect of him working for Joe White has on him, and he ends up stepping on dog crap by the end of the episode, and he gets his shoe and then he smears it over the dog owner's face, which I thought was really funny, but also shows how slowly into, not even slowly, but how quickly he's going into madness and kind of that old side of himself by seeing Joe White. There was also this funny moment in the episode where Joe White's doing this dumbbell workout, and then some guy, I guess he was just trying to be a nice guy, but he didn't really understand who he was messing with, and then he starts trying to give tips to Joe White, and then Joe White threatens him. And once again, little things like that in the show, which is really insignificant to the overall show and the plot of it, but it's just little moments like that that make Joe White make him feel not like a character, but more like an actual person. And I really appreciate that this show is building this character through little moments like that. The next thing I'll be talking about is pretty much the main part of this episode, where it's Joe White sends these guys to this festival, his guys to the festival, and they end up dealing with these biker gangs. And then he tells them, or the biker gangs tell Joe White's crew to, back off, this is our part. And then they don't want to move, and then they want to sell their stuff here. So then the biker guys are like, all right, we'll let you slide right now. And then they, a couple scenes later, go to their boss, and they tell them what happened. And then, one of the people in the group end up saying, oh, these people are unreliable. We can't trust them. If they can't even do something like that, imagine when there's something big going down. And then they end up beating the crap out of the two guys from the scene that we saw before. And I thought that was a very interesting scene. And then eventually they come back to the same party against Joe White's crew. Obviously, Joe White's not actually there, but they end up beating the crap out of Joe White's guys. Also, Armand gives Joe White this very big piece of information at the beginning of the episode, which is the fact that Pete set up Joe White 25 years ago, and Armand was actually trying to tell Joe White this information before, he got locked up, but he couldn't because, of what would have happened to him, which I don't remember exactly who Pete is, so let me know in the comments who that is. But if this is true, it'll be interesting to see how Joe White handles this. Maybe not in next episode, because usually TV shows, when they give information like this, they don't really address it until a couple episodes later. But later down the line, I could definitely see Joe White confronting Pete and his crew about this, and it'll be interesting to see how everything goes down. The final part I'll say before I wrap this video up is probably my only criticism of this episode, and obviously Tyson's father has been catching on to what he's been doing recently. And actually in this episode, he finds out exactly what Tyson's doing, and obviously he follows him to this place to see, to get that proof, that physical proof of what he's been suspecting all along. And instead of dragging his son out and cursing him out or something, he joins in, which surprised me. I thought he was gonna not let him do something like this, but at the same time, I can see why his dad would let him do this, because he is a man now. He can't be told what to do anymore. But at the same time, as any parent, would you, no matter the age, would you let your son or daughter get into something like this, no matter if they're 20 something years old, or do you let them make their own decisions? And even if those decisions that they're making are bad. Also, one more thing. I know I said the other thing was my final thing, but this is my final thing. Obviously, when Tyson's dad joins the fight and everyone, pulls up on these biker guys, it is a pretty good action scene. Obviously, I didn't like it as much as, the car scene that they did last episode, but this one was pretty good as well. It was also not necessarily a bonding moment for Tyson and his dad, but it was a bonding moment for everyone else in the crew, because they ended up taking down these guys together. And overall, those are my thoughts on Tulsa King episode 4. I will give my halfway review of this show next week, and I'll give my score next week. But overall, this is a pretty great show so far, and it'll be interesting to see how it ends. Have you guys seen episode 4 of Tulsa King? Let me know in the comments. And those are my thoughts on that.